Hey there, guys. It's Mr. Sapora here, and we're going to be talking about ecology this week. The study of ecology, what ecosystems are, and that's going to be pretty much this whole unit, actually, for the next 4 weeks as we get into this online version of what we're doing here. Okay, so for this one, I have one assignment this week, and it is posted in Google Classroom. You can see it here. It's just a notes page, and you're basically going to fill out this notes page. As we go along through the lecture and through the slideshow I'm about to give, I will post the slideshow, so you'll have that to look back on. And there's also an online chapter that I will put a link up for as well that covers everything that we're talking about here today, and it's really short and sweet and to the point. For the notes page, just fill it out. Taking notes from the slideshow. Also, I give a couple places here where I ask for examples and things like that that are your own, so you're going to have to come up with those. And so just make sure your work is your own on this, and no two documents when they get turned in should look exactly the same. That would be great. And it's for 15 points, and that's what's going to go in the grade book. Okay, one of the assignments that you're going to get. Okay, so for this week on ecology, let's get started with this presentation here, shall we? As you can see, I'm sitting in my office here in the coronavirus lockdown, outside in the backyard in an ecosystem. Hey, how neat is that? Okay, let me see if I can do this without getting it cut off. Well, we're going to do our best here. I'll move this thing around if I need to so that you can see everything that's in the frame. Okay, so ecology. In biology, there's different fields of study. There's like cell biology, there's molecular, there's genetics, which studies DNA. And on the other end of things, there's ecology, big picture stuff. This is my favorite topic. This is kind of what I specialized in. And it's looking at individual organisms, but also populations of individual organisms in the entire environment and how everything in it works and balances and interacts. So for ecology, let's get started here with a definition of what an ecosystem is. If my slideshow will work. Hey, there we go. Let me move this box. Okay. I'm just getting used to the software. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Ecology. So ecology is the study of how living things interact with each other and with their environment, the physical environment. Living things interact with things like rain and wind and all those things as well. They have an influence on them. So ecology is the study of that kind of big picture thing there. Looking at the slideshow here, these are all pictures that I took in Alaska, except for this bottom right one here of the eagle and the gulls and stuff. I stole that one. But this picture here kind of shows an ecosystem of multiple different bird species and the big numbers of those bird species there, all stacked up on these cliffs, nesting. And then here's a close-up of some of these. These are thick-billed murres right here. Okay, so ecology. How living things interact with each other, so how the murres would interact with each other, how the murres and the kittiwakes, those are the gull-like birds there, might interact as well on this cliff. They really do divide up the nesting area. You'll see the kittiwakes need a little more of a ledge where they can actually build a nest, whereas the murres are on these really tight little vertical rocks that they don't even actually build a nest. They just lay an egg on the rock and sit on it. It's kind of cool. And then things like predator-prey relationships. Who eats what, right? So the murre is a predator. It's a carnivore, actually. It's eating a tiny little baby fish here, called a sand lance. And then, of course, bigger things prey on the murres. The eagles will eat the murre itself, and the gulls will come in and swoop down and eat the eggs and the chicks. Yeah, nature. Okay, next slide, shall we? Okay, so important sort of important definitional term here that we're going to need when looking at ecosystems, and I'm sorry I'm having to move the screen around on you as we go. Okay, a species. So in order to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about this, I'm going to be talking about different species or groups of species, right? Individuals within a species. What is a species? So a species is a group of individuals who are genetically related and who can breed and produce fertile young. So there's different species of cats, for instance, right? And a mountain lion and, your little Mr. Mittens are two different species of cats. They can't interbreed and have a baby together, and they have genetically, related traits and things like that. They look very similar. They are very similar. And we as humans, we're all the same species. We're all different, but we're 99.9% the same genetically. Um, okay. So different species, again, can look really similar at times. They can be closely related or distantly related, right? I'm closely related to chimpanzees and other apes, primates, but I'm more distantly related to birds and then more distantly related to bananas. Although sometimes I feel a little bananas. And then, of course, more and more distantly related to things like bacteria. So examples of different species down here, right, would be the two different types of murres, right? These are seabirds. They both live here in our ocean. The common murre is one type of species, and then the thick-billed murre is another. And if you notice, they have one part of their name in common, their urea, but then the species part of their name, right, algae and Lomvia are different. They're different. So they show that they're different species, but closely related. The more distantly related, the more the names are going to differ from each other and the farther away they get. And there's some physical differences you can see between these two species as well. One would be that the common murre over here is sort of a chocolate brown versus sort of a black, a jet black for the thick-billed murre. Common murre, it's just, there's no white line here, where if you notice in the thick-billed murre, there's almost like a little white mustache. And the last difference, common murre, it's straight across here. There's no V, whereas on the thick-billed murre, it goes up and makes a V on the neck. So again, closely related but different, or they could be completely different related, right? A common murre is pretty distantly related from an elephant. Right? Okay. Although they are both vertebrates and have backbones, so they'd be more closely related than those two would be to a jellyfish. So a group of species, again, individuals, genetically related, and they can produce offspring together. That's how biologists define the term species. So when looking at ecosystems, there are 4 different levels. Again, I'm having to scroll around, my bad, on the screen setup. 4 different levels of ecological organization. In other words, how an ecosystem is organized. So living things that interact with one another, because we're talking about ecology, we're talking about interactions, can be organized into 4 different groups or levels based on certain differences within those groups. And if I scroll down here in this center image, you can see where we start out here, right? We start with the individual, population, community, and then lastly, ecosystem. I'll talk about it later, but pardon me, these last two, biome and biosphere, I really don't count as levels of ecology per se. So the first level of organization we're going to talk about, okay, in an ecosystem starts with the individual, the you. Okay, so the individual organism would be the first level, and that can be any individual organism. So in this picture, it's just the individual bird. And again, when we're talking about species, we're not talking about a species here. We're talking about an individual within that species. It can be a single-celled thing like a bacteria or an amoeba, but it can be a big thing too, like a redwood tree or a whale or a bird or me. Even though I'm made of many cells, all my cells have the same DNA and they're all working together most of the time to produce, something amazing. Yeah. Okay. First level of ecological organization, individual organism, you. Next one, population. So if we move out, we're moving out. So we start with the individual, and this is where biologists a lot of times spend their time focusing and studying. But as ecologists, we really don't look at individuals, we look at populations. We want to look at the group of individuals. That's what really matters. So it's a group of individual organisms, all belonging to the same species, and all interacting in the same area. You have to interact if you're going to be in an ecosystem. So the same species interacting. So in this picture here, it's all of these thick-billed murres, right? This is a population. All of them are the same species and interacting in the same area. Same thing down here, but I believe these are common murres actually. I'd have to zoom in more, but they're on a flat ledge. That leads me to believe that I took this picture, but it's been a while. And all of these are crowded together and interacting as a population. So in ecology, when we talk about populations, we're talking about the same species. You can take a look behind me. You hear lots of birds and trees. Behind me is a population of willow trees. Right on. You see that? Let me see. Can I blow this up? Yeah. Okay, there I am. Hey. Population of willow trees behind me. There's an individual spruce you can see back there. But there's a bunch of individual willows. That makes a population. It's a population of grass. Hey, reed canary grass right over there. And then, of course, all the birds and stuff that are singing around me as well. Okay, let's get back to the lesson. Focus. Next up on the hit parade after population, we're going to go to community. So we start with the individual, we branch out to the population, same species, interacting. And then in ecology, when we're talking about ecosystems, another step out would be the community. And a community is all the different living things, all the species that are in that area, all interacting. So again, they have to interact. This includes plants, animals, bacteria, fungus, right? All the different levels, protists, that are all in that ecosystem interacting. So a simplified version on this rock would be one population of birds and then another population of birds, horned puffins and crested auklets. Two different populations, right? But together they're interacting, making up a community. They've divided up the rocks and things like that. If you go down into a tropical ocean ecosystem, they have really intense, diverse communities of all kinds of different types of living things, right? From sea stars to corals to vertebrate fishes to slugs and worms and all kinds of things interacting in that community there. And then behind me, right, is one big biological community as well. All the different trees and plants and birds that are interacting right there. Still different from an ecosystem. What makes it different from an ecosystem? I'm going to tell you. Okay, an ecosystem, then we got to add in one more thing, right? So if we take this whole side of the screen over here and leave it out, right? So we've got all the biological things living together, but we need to add in the non-biological, and that's what you see on the right side of your screen. That would be the rain, the sunlight, the temperature, and the type of soil and rocks that sit below it all. That is really what shapes what we call an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of organisms and its physical or abiotic environment. By the word abiotic, I'm referring to the non-living parts of the environment. The rain, right? That's a non-living thing. It's just water. The temperature, how hot it is outside. The amount of sunlight you get, that's different from temperature because it's cold in the Arctic, even in the summer, but they get 24 hours of sunlight versus might be dark in the wintertime there and cold. So how much sunlight do they get? And then, of course, the types of rocks and soil that, there we go, rocks and soil at the bottom of your screen that exist down there as well. Okay. So all of these things combine then to make an ecosystem. It's all of the different populations of living things, right? The different individual types of species, but many of them crowded together, interacting with each other in this environment right here. All of these exist on this tiny little island right here. These are all photos I took in Alaska on this one island. And all of these things have to interact and share the space. Combine that with the weather, right? The temperature, the soil, the sunlight, etc., nutrients. That makes the ecosystem. I couldn't take all the living things from here, the community, and put it in the tropics with a much hotter temperature, right? Because all of these things are adapted to this particular environment, so their interactions are based on that. Okay, a couple more slides real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. So populations of living things are shaped by their environment. And in a previous unit, I talked about evolution, but we didn't get to that this trimester. So populations, not individuals, are shaped by their environment. And the last level that often gets talked about is a thing called biomes. But biomes to me are not an actual level of ecological organization because living things don't interact out here on this biome level. They stop interacting at the ecosystem. So we have biomes and then the biosphere. Biomes are similar climates that produce similar characteristics in animals and plants, but it's not a level because the things there don't interact. The organisms in a desert in Australia don't interact with the desert organisms in Africa, although they may look similar. And lastly, the biosphere. Biosphere in biology is all the parts of the planet, all the living things, and that's from the bottom of the ocean to the highest mountains to deep in ice and rocks. But again, not a level because they don't interact in this level. All right, Here's a different example of the biomes. I'm about to run out of time. Fill out the note sheet. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll meet up for a Google Hangout sometime this week, and you can ask me questions there. Check out the